Okay, so welcome to this webinar on mission at festivals and events. My name's Holly. If you've not seen me in a webinar before, I work on the Evangelism and Growth team and the Connectional team. I'll be sort of guiding us through this evening along with some other fabulous people who I might just ask to introduce themselves now, if that's okay. Bridget, Pete and Jill, would you mind just introducing yourselves?
Hi,
I'll go first.
Okay.
I'm Pete Bangs. I am the missioner for the Meon Valley Circuit, which essentially means I'm a mission enabler. But as I said before, they hadn't actually invented that job title at the time. So my job is to encourage people to get out of their buildings and onto the streets and to talk to people about their faith. And that's the short version.
Thank you, Pete. Go for it, Bridget.
Hi, I'm Bridget, and I live in Devon. I'm Learning and Development Officer with the Methodist Church, serving the Southwest. I think, you know, that's by and by, because the other things to do with me is that I am a farmer's wife and involved in all the county shows here in the Southwest, and have been for a long time through the young farmers and now through the church as well. So got a good understanding of that. And in my background, used to be heavily involved with the Sanctuary Tent, which is part of Glastonbury Festival and is the church presence at Glastonbury Festival.
Thank you, Bridget. And over to you, Jill.
Hi, I'm Jill Marsh. It's great to see some old friends and meet some new friends. I'm a Methodist minister, but at the moment I'm called into a role called Inclusive Church Implementation Officer, which is basically about how do we treat each other well and with dignity and relish and rejoice in the diversity of human life. And that in the strategy we've got, it mentions festivals. And I've only got 5 minutes later, so if I talk any more now, I've done my 5 minutes.
Thank you, Jill. I'm glad that we've got somebody else from the Connectional team with a longer job title than mine in the Zoom. So this evening is going to be really about sharing some stories, sharing some insights and wisdom, we hope, and also hearing from you all, and recognising that we might all come from different perspectives into this topic. So some of us might already be engaged in this work, you might already be running things at different events, or you might be thinking about doing so. So recognising that we'll probably all come with different levels of experience, but we do want to create space to hear from you all as the webinar goes on. We are committing to being finished by 9 p.m. We definitely won't be later than that. It's possible we might end before that, depending on how our timings pan out, but we'll definitely be finished by 9. And I just invite you to use the chat function as much as you'd like to add your own thoughts, to talk with one another, but also if you've got any particular questions that come to you as the evening goes on, please do pop them in the chat and we'll come to them at the end of the evening. There will be some breakout time so you can share with others during the evening, and there will be some kind of time where you can just unmute and share in this forum all together. As we're a small group, it makes sense that we can just share openly with each other. So just by means of introducing the theme, I just wanted to talk about what is mission at events and festivals and why is it a good thing to do. Now, this might feel a bit like teaching grandmothers to suck eggs, but I just thought it would be a good kind of introduction to our evening together. So simply, mission at events and festivals is being present as a group of Christians in non-religious places. We might call them unaffiliated places, places that aren't affiliated with the Christian faith. So this is very much not about fundraising. It's not about converting people. It's not about judging anyone. It's about being a blessing in places that aren't in our church buildings. So getting out outside of our church buildings to love people, to listen to people, to unashamedly witness to our faith, to our Christian faith in those places. So it might mean a whole bunch of different things. It might mean having a stall at your local summer fete, your village fete. It could be quite a small local event like a summer fete or a Christmas fair. It might mean hosting a venue at a nearby music festival. So it might be something as big as Glastonbury Festival. Bridget will talk to us a bit about that context later. Or it might be something, you might have a local music festival or a local sports event or a local car rally or a history reenactment. You know, it could be anything that you've got going on that you know is happening locally to you that you want to engage with. It might mean taking a roving team to something. So for example, if you've got a citywide or a town-wide arts event, maybe you have a roving team of Christians walking around the city whilst it's on, handing out bottles of water, a bit like kind of a street angels or a street pastors model, if you're familiar with those organisations. It might mean being at a county show or an agricultural show, as Bridget's already mentioned, running a tent there or an event. Or it might mean, you know, if you've got things like protests or marches or carnivals that go past your church, it might mean standing outside your church with a stand or a stall and having a presence kind of at an event like that. So it could be a whole bunch of different diverse things, loads of stuff I've not mentioned there, but those are just kind of some examples of the ways that you might engage in events and festivals missionally. Now, as I said, there will be lots of different experience in the room already. Some of you have probably already been involved in doing stuff like this, and it would be great to hear from you about your experiences. It'd be great, in fact, if you could just pop in the chat now. So why are you here tonight? Is it because you want to learn more about this kind of mission? Is it because you're already engaged in mission? Have you been doing it for years and you just want to hear other people's stories? It'd be great to just hear from you in the chat now. Why are you here this evening? And I'll just carry on sharing a little bit about the introduction. So I think being present as Christians in these places gives us an amazing opportunity to meet new people and to build relationships and to offer hospitality and welcome and to hold safe space for people who might have questions about faith, who might be interested in exploring faith. And I think also this kind of mission where we take a group of people out into community, into events, offers really great opportunities for people that might not be the most natural evangelists or mission-minded people, but people that are willing to kind of get out and do this stuff. And it gives people an opportunity to engage in mission that might not naturally find ways to do that. Now, I'm aware that a lot of the, I haven't seen anything in the chat so far, by the way, so do please pop in the chat while you're here. I'm aware that a lot of events, the things I've just mentioned, do happen over the summer, and we're obviously fast approaching the summer. And it would be, I think it would be quite a tight turnaround if you're coming to this webinar this evening with absolutely no plans, but wanting to do something, to turn something around in time for this summer. But we really do encourage you to visit events that are local to you this summer, because research is really important when you're engaging in events like this. And thank you, I'm seeing some things in the chat now, thank you very much. Graham's looking for ideas for agricultural show. Michelle's wanted to be a Christian presence at the biggest agricultural show in August, fantastic. Wanted to know what we can do at festivals, thank you, Anne. Angela had done some previous stuff, but hoping to get more ideas. Hilary also looking for ideas for a town show. Julia's new to this, but leading a small team at local shows this summer. Awesome, thank you. Loads of great reasons for coming along, and we hope that we'll tick all of those boxes and you'll go away with some ideas and some paths to pursue in terms of doing this mission work. So as I was saying, what we would firstly encourage anyone to do that was looking to get involved in mission at festivals and events is to go to the event and listen and observe and see what's going on. Do a bit of research basically. And Pete, I think you're going to say a little bit now about why you think that's important.
Absolutely. When you set up at an event, whatever the event may be, it's really, really valuable to look as if you belong there. So we went to a folk festival. We took a sort of hippie look to the place with bunting and bright lights and lots of Celtic Christian symbols that got mistaken for pagan symbols because people didn't know any better. So we had great fun. We went in and we looked like we belonged there. The one thing that sticks to mind was one of the storytellers, the traveling salesman, came up to the minister and asked him, so are you guys New Agers or pagans? The look on his face when he was told no, we're the local Methodist church was quite a sight to see. But the thing is, you have to dress right for wherever you go. It's the same as if you were going out for the evening. So if you were to go to a country show, you want a different look to what you'd have at a folk festival. If you were going to something like the Comic-Con with hundreds of people dressed up in strange fantasy costumes, you'd have to have a completely different look again. So it's, for me, this is about the core principles, the core pillars of it, which are transferable, and then you dress it however you need to for the place you're going. But if you don't dress it right, people won't come in. At the last Wickham festival we were at, I think it was the anti-cruelty people were there, and they had their big corporate-looking tent, and their pretty young people in perfect outfits, and nobody went near them because you were in a country area where people hunt, people shoot, people ferret and things. They hadn't considered where they were going to make sure that they dressed their tent and everything in a way that gave them an opportunity to talk to people. So how you look is incredibly important. Hello, Jackie. Nice to have you with us. One last thing, Anne, I noticed you said that you've got to go at 8:30. If you've got it, if there's anything further you want to talk about afterwards, feel free to email me and we'll arrange to have a chat.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. So I think we're talking not only about not mostly about how you dress your tent, aren't you, rather than whether or not you're in the right welly boots. That's
yeah, absolutely.
Really helpful in terms of remembering the importance of context, and in terms of remembering that we're there to sort of be with people, to be alongside people in an authentic way, but also in a way that fits in with the place that we're at. Thank you. So we're going to dive into a bit of story sharing, and we've got Pete and Bridget here that are both going to share some examples of the ways that they've engaged in mission at festivals and events before. Pete mentioned a little bit already there about the elemental tent. So Pete, I just wonder if you could say a bit more about what elemental is and how it worked for you. I'm going to pin you if that's okay.
Yeah, basically elemental tent is Bridget's sanctuary that we stole. in all honesty. The minister that we had at the time, 7 years ago, David Moss, recognised the presence of this music festival and went, why is there no church presence here? So being a very mission-minded man, he arranged this. We got in there. I was invited to join the group as a prophetic artist. So I spent a lot of time running around giving people pictures and going, hey, I have this picture for you. I could be mad or I could be on a mission from God. It doesn't matter. And so we worked our way in there, and we got to the point where, because we took that caring attitude of not looking to push our faith on people, but wanting to be there to serve people as essentially an oasis in a music festival, which is designed to either bust your ears or empty your wallet, and we were offering something for free, we got a lot of people coming through. We got a lot of conversations going. Two very, very quick conversations. First one, we had a guy that came. I was stood talking to the minister, and a guy come walking past, biker with a Harley Davidson tattoo on, a pink bobbed wig, and I was looking at him, and I was drawing a picture as he came past and went running after him. And I gave him this picture, which was the storyteller, a guy telling stories. And I just said to him, I introduced myself, said to him, I can see you obviously get around, you've got a bike, I would imagine. He said, yeah, he'd got divorced and had traveled around the States and around Europe on his Harley Davidson. And I said to him, well, if you ever get in trouble, stories are a great currency. Go and find the local church. It'll have the phone number and contact details for the local minister outside. Give them a call. I said, I can't promise they'll all be wonderful, but the majority will be willing to come and give you a hand if you get stuck. So 2 to 3 weeks later, I got an email from him, and he said he'd been in Germany on his bike when his bike broke down. He went to look for his wallet, couldn't find his wallet, and he remembered what I'd said. So he found the local church, phoned the minister. This minister came out to meet him, helped him wheel his bike into the grounds of the church so it was locked away and safe, took him home, fed him with his family, put him up overnight, took him to the police station the next day where his wallet was waiting for him, and he was able to get everything sorted out. And he came back to me and said, I didn't really believe it because I thought all Christians were less than pleasant people. He said, you've really turned my idea around about what goes on. So it was a small seed, but it was an inroad that we would never have had without this. Another one, very quickly, was outside the tent. We put a little table with crosses and little booklets and all sorts on it for people to help themselves to. I was stood next to it when a young lady came past and asked if she could take a dozen crosses. And I said, yeah, fine, that's what they're there for, help yourself. I said, if you don't mind me asking, why do you want that many? And she then proceeded to explain to me how her and her partner and her mother had lost so many family members over the last year that they couldn't actually get round to all the cemeteries to visit them. So they'd set up a little memorial in their home, and they wanted a cross for each one. So I said to her, by all means, help yourself. And if you need a break during the day, do come back and join us. There's people here who'd be happy to see you. They came back later. I set them up with the person that I thought would be the best person to chat with them, who then turned out to be the partner's ex-teacher, who then had the most amazing conversation. And he then was introduced to a guy named Pete Wall, who makes nets in the same fashion that the disciples would have done for fishing. And Pete got this guy making this net, and he was running around. I saw him afterwards running around the festival, showing it to everybody he knew, going, I got to make this net. This net is amazing. These people are lovely. They're so nice. So this is what it's about for me. It's about making those small connections that have an opportunity to grow beyond that. So that's the quick version of my stories. I should back away again now.
Thank you, Pete. That's great. Brilliant stories. Yeah, about the kinds of transformation that's possible. You know, you use words like small seeds and this is what I'm here for, and you get a sense of the excitement that you have, the passion that you have for the elemental tent and the difference that it makes at the festival and in people's lives as well. So thank you for sharing. Bridget, I'm going to add you to the spotlight screen, and I wonder if you could share your stories. I don't know if you're going to share about agricultural shows or about Glastonbury, but over to you.
Yeah, and the same as Pete, if people want to contact me on specific things afterwards, then please do. I'll pop my email address into the chat. So let's start with the sanctuary, really, because I think actually the principles for it being set up initially helps us when we're thinking about any kind of presence, anything. So the sanctuary was originally set up by Michael Evis and the then vicar of the Pilton parish, and together they saw a need for the festival. They saw that at that time there was no big fence like you find around the festival now. People would travel down and they'd manage to get under fences, through fences, and you know, where fences weren't existing, they would just get onto the festival site, and so they would come without any tents, without any provisions, without anything. And so the real need then was welfare, and so the church tent, as it was known at that time, was set up and birthed, and it really was a place for people to come and to sleep. If they were too stoned at night, they would be pointed towards the illuminated cross at the top of the hill, and then they would find a bed. Or, you know, back in those days, the Fagin gangs would come down to the festival to really, you know, the pickpocketing, the slicing of tents was a real thing. And so actually people would come, and generally they would have like up to about 100 people sleeping in a great big marquee at the festival. Then as the big fencing went up and security became a real issue to the site, it was only in the years of flooding that actually the tent was used for this kind of welfare need on that level. But so things started to change at that point, really change at that point. And but you know, actually the years when it was raining and everybody got flooded out was when the marquee was full of people and it was a vibrant place. And then came the years where actually the weather was kind to people, and actually in those years again the church responded to the need. So the need at that time was to address like things like contraception at the festival. So they would, you know, give out various things, or they would just simple glass of water as people were coming up the hill to find their tent pitch, you know, a space of grass somewhere to pitch their tent. They would grab a glass of water. And so we really responded to need over the time. And I think that would be my big piece of advice in whatever you're doing. Try to be less about agenda and more about service. Let's serve the need. The other things I would say about story-based and being part of the Glastonbury tent, well, I could tell you all sorts of things that went on in that Glastonbury tent. But actually, it's about people coming up to us and recognizing that we were the face of the church, you know, to a whole host of people. And you need to be really aware of that, because actually, if you're all stood there and you're all white and you're all middle class, that says something about the church. And actually, that's really important to really recognise. And I know we've got Jill Marsh on the call tonight, and I'm sure she'll go into that a little bit more. But, you know, actually, as the face of the church, we need to be really mindful of that. The other thing to say alongside that would be in anything, so whether it be the agricultural shows or our presence at Glastonbury, it's a real ecumenical feel. Let's drop all the baggage of theology that we all have, and let's just serve together, because people outside the church walls don't see denomination anyway. So it was really important that we were voices all together. The real highlights is when people brought their children for baptism to the church's tent. They would just rock up. Oh, we met here, you know, 15 years ago, and now we're bringing our baby to be baptized. Or they would contact the vicar and say, we really would love to get married. And he's like, and for years he was like, well, you can't get married at there, you just can't, but we can bless you. And then later on they got a license. So actually it was an amazing time. It was an amazing time. But what I would say, and you know, I haven't said much about the rural agricultural shows. I know I'm coming back in a minute, so maybe I say something about that then. But it was about engaging with the need of the festival. Recognize you are a guest at that festival. Really, you know, guest. Really always never try and get around loopholes or rules that they're setting down. You know, you are a guest, honor it. And just remember, you're the face of the church. So actually, as much inclusion, diversity amongst your team is really important. Is that okay, Holly? That
is fantastic. Thank you, Bridget. Yeah, really. I mean, what a flavour of Glastonbury Festival we got there. I was a bit worried we were straying into kind of non-PG PG stories for a moment, but fantastic. Thank you for sharing, Bridget. I thought we could just talk a little bit about why are we going to turn up in these places? What are our motivations? What's our big why? Because I think our motivations are really important, because we are there as Christians, we are there as the church, we're not there as secular organisations, so we are there to point to Jesus and to share something of the good news. But what does appropriate evangelism look like in these spaces? Now, I know the word evangelism comes with a whole ton of baggage, so we might prefer to use words like witness or sharing the good news or sharing God's love. We might prefer to use other terms. We might think of evangelism as being about Billy Graham or about standing on the corner of streets with placards about hell. But evangelism is broader and more beautiful than those stereotypes. And I thought it would be really interesting now for us to think a little bit about what do we think evangelism at festivals and events shouldn't be, and what do we think it should be? So let's start with what do we think it shouldn't be? So complete this sentence for me. Evangelism at festivals and events is not about, and I invite you to unmute and call out an answer or put something in the chat, whichever you would prefer. Evangelism at festivals and events is not about. Anyone got a word or a phrase to put on the end of that sentence?
Making converts.
Thank you, Pete. Evangelism at festivals and events is not about making converts. I agree. Anyone else got something they'd like to put on the end of that sentence?
It's not about filling rotas.
Oh, I think I heard two things. I think I heard someone say judging people. 100%. Evangelism at festivals and events is not about judging people. And I heard somebody else say evangelism at festivals and events is not about filling rotas. Yeah.
No.
It's not about.
I mean, I've been to a church for the first time before, and they asked me if I was visiting or local, and when I said I was visiting, well, we can't put your name on a rota then.
yeah. Thanks, Angela. So it's not about recruiting people to kind of do our stuff at church for us. Absolutely not. Jackie's put in the chat, it's not about being in your face. Yeah, exactly. It's not about having an agenda and being pushy. Jill, it's not about myself. Thank you. So it's not about us. It's about the people that we're engaging with. Anyone else got something to finish that sentence off with? Julia, thank you. It's not about Methodism. So we're not there, as Bridget said, kind of particularly representing our denomination or being, too boundaried about denominations. But we may be there as a Methodist group, but it's not about Methodism. Agreed. Anyone else like to finish that sentence? Yeah, I think another one I might add is speaking at people, and I think we've got some of that already. Kind of, it's not about in your face, but it's about conversation. It's about getting to know people. It's not about speaking at people. So I invite you now to finish this sentence, which is the more fun version. Yes, Angela, thank you. It's not about raising funds for the church roof. Absolutely. My mum's church set up a mission committee. They were going to do all this amazing mission stuff. They decided to do this outreach event at their local train station. They took fundraising buckets. I was like, no, stop. It's not about raising money. It's about being good news, being in relationship with people. We might need to do fundraising events, but this is not it. This is not our opportunity. Okay, so the next question, evangelism at festivals and events is about, please do unmute and shout out or put in the chat, what is evangelism at festivals and events about? I'll start. Listening. Go on, be brave.
Joining in with the fun.
Joining in with the fun, yeah, thank you. It's not about having a party. Anyone else?
There's a lot of stuff coming up in the chat that
Oh, sorry, I'm not looking.
Really does get it.
Yeah, absolutely. I looked away from the chat for 2 seconds. Thank you. Yeah, being salt and light, being with, loitering with intent to be present. I like that, Jackie.
Yeah, I was going to add about, you know, joining the party and sharing the joy, because most of these events are fairly joyful.
Absolutely.
And yeah, do not go along with your Sunday long faces.
Absolutely. The celebrations, listening and hearing, welcoming, conversation, being relevant, being there for people. Thank you. But creativity as well, maybe, and about giving people an opportunity to be creative sometimes, because I don't think as adults sometimes we miss out on opportunities to do fun, crafty things and creative things. Being with, thank you, building connections, building community, story sharing. Some phrases that Pete used earlier when he was talking about the elemental tent was small seeds, so planting small seeds. And Bridget used the phrase being guest, not host, and that I think is exactly the model of evangelism that we're looking at here, being guest, not host. And Bridget also talked about engaging with the need of the place. So what do people need in the place that you're reaching out to? Being relevant, I suppose, Debbie, you said that as well, but connecting with people's needs. It's about love, it's about inclusivity. It might be about inviting people into prayer or worship. So Pete, I know you might talk a bit more about this, about the way you've done this elemental, but inviting people into some form of prayer or worship in your space. A lot of the work we do in evangelism is about undoing the work of harmful evangelism in the past or harmful church practices. So creating safe space is really important in evangelism, where, you know, we might be dealing with people that have been traumatized or by church in the past or by evangelism in the past, and so holding safe space is really important in opportunities like this where we're meeting people from outside the church. Now I think if we can get this bit right, what we mean by evangelism, you know, all of the stuff that you've just said, if we can get this bit right, then the whole thing will just fall into place when we put together a presence for mission and festivals at mission at festivals and events. If we get this bit wrong, if we do the evangelism that we talked about before, if we do evangelism that's in your face, it's about Methodism, it's about myself, it's about fundraising, then we might as well not show up at all. You know, I think this is the real crux of it. Personally, I believe that evangelism, whether it's at a festival or whether it's anywhere, should always be like this. It should always be about listening and love and being salt and light and being with and building relationships and community and conversation and listening. I think this is just good evangelism, but it's especially true when we're in situations that we, like Bridget said before, where we are the guest and not the host. And when we turn up in secular spaces like this, we do walk a fine line of being recognisably Christian and pointing to Jesus, while also not being dogmatic or alienating people. It's the fine line of kind of authenticity versus alienation. And I think it is really important in evangelism that we're authentic, that we're authentically ourselves, that we're authentically Christian. People will expect us to be. We're the church, and they will see straight through us if we are not authentic. But it's about the way that we interact with people needs to be about building real relationships, respectful relationships. Even if it's just a 30-second engagement we have with someone, it's about the nature of that relationship, in the same way that Jesus models in the Gospels. When he engages with people, it's about listening, it's about love, it's about respect, it's about conversation. We say in evangelism, we have to move at the pace of trust. And I think that is the case in at events like this with other people. As we're talking to people, we move at the pace of trust. So we say things that feel appropriate to the conversation and to the context without alienating or judging anybody. It's always about putting relationships first, putting people first, whilst also paying attention to the opportunities that God gives you to talk about faith. Jill, I'm going to ask you to pop onto the screen now. Let me just find you and spotlight you, and maybe just say, we've talked a little bit already about some of this, but just say how you feel that this relates to your work around inclusion and justice and dignity and solidarity. There you are.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really only going to be a minute or two because a lot of what you've all already said is sort of stuff I was going to say, so that's good. So basically the strategy for justice, dignity and solidarity is what we adopted at conference last year. It is our EDI policy, really. It's our equality, diversity and inclusion policy, but actually it begins very much along all the lines we've been talking about. So the idea, the belief that we've got as Methodist Christians that God did create everybody, absolutely everybody, in God's own image. So whenever we meet anybody in any culture, any background, any context, we can learn something more about God. So all that stuff about kind of listening, and my own experience really has been as a mission enabler in various settings. And I do think that this work that I'm involved with helping the church do now is all about mission. You know, if God is really for everybody, then actually everybody can also teach us something about God, and we have things to learn. And we don't go in there saying, well, if you want to be a Christian, you have to be like this. We actually want to affirm how people actually are, and find ways of helping them to engage with their own journey to God, but also thinking about, you know, what we can learn from them as well. So I loved all the stuff about being guest. Hilary, I'm hoping you'll say something at some point about your work with the Little Mix concerts, and you know, because I think wherever we kind of meet with people, we just have to put our own assumptions on one side and just relish and enjoy the fact that God's given us this encounter with other people. So I don't need to say any more than that, I don't think, Holly, because I'll put my email in the chat line like everybody else has, because I've got this job for another year or so. But it's exciting because if God is for all, then you know, this all hangs together. It's not like an extra thing we have to do. It's something that we're all doing together.
Absolutely. In my mind, inclusion and evangelism are two sides of the same coin. You know, if we want to be a diverse church, then our evangelism can enable that. And if we are also wishing to be an evangelistic church, then it's important that we're also inclusive.
I do agree with that. The only problem we have is with the word inclusive. So it's funny because it's in my job title, but I just do want to query that idea that we are deciding whether or not to include other people. Yeah. Which is why we didn't use that name in the strategy, because actually that there's a real, you know, if it's about God including everybody, and therefore everybody we meet, wherever we go, we know that God includes them, fair enough. If it encourages Christians to think, well, we can include you if we choose to, but we don't have to, then I don't think it's that helpful. So I'm not that keen on that particular word, actually, but the point's the same.
No, yeah, and I think there's similar issues with the word evangelism, of course, but also with the relationship between power and evangelism. You know, we think we're the ones that contain something that we have to pass on to somebody else, when in actual fact, in my own experience of evangelism, it's much more about somehow finding God in the middle between me and somebody else, and God doing the work and God doing the surprising. So I think there's often complicated relationships with these words and what they mean about power. But yeah, I could talk all day about that kind of thing. But thank you, Jill. It's great to have you with us this evening, and I hope you'll pop back up a bit later on and share some other perspectives if you have some. Pete and Bridget, I'm going to add you back onto the screen, and then in a minute we're going to go into breakout groups. But just before we go into breakout groups, I wonder if you have any stories that you would like to share about evangelism and the way that evangelism has looked for you, both in festival places or event places.
Yeah, so I can start from a very negative tone and say that I've seen it in a shocking way. And when people rock up, so you know, the sanctuary tent has far more volunteers every year than it can ever cope with. So actually we probably have over probably 4 times as many volunteers as actually there is places. And on people's you know, application forms, sometimes the stories they tell, I'm like, I don't think you get it. I don't think you get that part of why we're here. We're here to serve and be a guest, and that's really important. The good news stories come from perhaps the agricultural shows, where genuinely people are there to serve tea and coffee to people and engage in conversation, and you just get guided on that conversation through what that person brings to the table that day. And whether you're just providing a place for that mother so that her toddler can run around while she breastfeeds her child, you know, that's really important. Or if it's that place where the farmer who is really struggling with his or her marriage breakdown and actually sees a familiar face that she knows or he knows and sits down and shares that cup of tea, you know, that's what it's about. Let's try and get away from the point that we need to bring our faith into this, because actually if our faith is real within us, actually it will bubble out of us and actually people will identify with it. It's not about us having to give it to people in a really strong way.
Thank you, Bridget. Yeah, hopefully evangelism is about just sharing the love of God that bubbles out of us, as you say, you know, sharing what we receive from God. Pete, what about you? Any stories you'd like to share about evangelism?
I think I agree totally with Bridget. The elemental tent, the basis is sitting down, having a cake and coffee and having someone to listen to you and talk with you. There have been a couple more outstanding stories that always come to mind. We use a thing called the Jesus deck. I don't know how many people are familiar with it. It's basically the four gospels set out on playing cards with pictures, verses, and a title. Lots of bright colours. It's very cleverly designed to look like one of the most popular tarot decks. So it really confuses people and gets conversations going. So we had it set out the front of the tent, and I saw three ladies stood there looking at it. So I walked over and said, "Hi, it caught your eye? The deck caught your eye?" And one of the women said, "I didn't realize Jesus did tarot cards." So I said to her, "Well, it's not actually tarot cards. Just tell me, what do you know about tarot?" And the three of them stood there with their hands on their hips and went, "We are tarot card readers and healers," which was a great start. And then one of them went, "I could do you a reading with those." So I pushed the deck over to her and said, "Go on then." And she struggled and couldn't do a thing with it. And I was patient and polite and let her try and figure her way through it, but she couldn't get anything out of it. She started going into weird numerology stuff that was really struggling. So I said to her, "I've seen what you're doing there. Let me have a go and see if I can make it work for you." And God stepped into the middle of it, and I told her life story. I told her how she'd gone off, just based on 3 cards. I told her how she'd gone off grid with her family, that she was setting them up so that they would be good after the world fell apart. And she filled in spaces around this. And I said to her, "Well, basically, you've just told me the book of Revelation." And she went, "Oh, what's that?" So I explained it to her and she went, "Oh, I think my partner's got a Bible at home. I'll go home and have a read of that." So we've gone from we are tarot card readers and healers to I'm going to go home and read the Bible now. It's just about being in the place for the conversation, however the conversation goes. So if the conversation goes in one direction, you go with it. If God is taking it in another, you just follow along. And that was really all I did there. One of the other really outstanding stories was the first time we went there, we had a guy who declared himself an atheist and would not come in the tent, but he wouldn't go away from it either. And he'd take a chair and he'd sit maybe 20 feet away from the tent on the first night, and then a bit closer and a bit closer and a bit closer. Never came in, but at the end of it, he found the minister and said to him, "If I'm the only person you've affected while you've been here, it's been worthwhile. I just wanted you to know that." He said, "There's something going on. I don't understand it. I didn't believe it, but now I'm not so sure." And 2 months later, he'd gone off and joined one of the local churches. And there was no conversation. There was nothing forced. He was just allowed to take his space and move it closer to get his feeling on what was going on. Nobody pushed anything on him. It was just God was in the mix and he had no way around it. So the conversations can be that big, or they can just be sitting down and sharing a cup of coffee and a piece of cake with someone while they talk to you about how much the festivals cost them because they've got 3 kids with them so far. It really is that diverse.
Thank you, Pete. I think you've given us a sense there of some of the weird and wonderful ways that things can happen at festivals that we might not expect. And I think we're called in these places to be there in a way that expects God to be doing stuff with us, with other people, you know, and that doesn't mean that we have to always be the ones like pointing to Jesus, but that we are called to be there in a way that expects God to be at work around us in people's lives. And things will happen, you know, and we can pay attention to that. And I think it's a really exciting opportunity. We're going to go into breakout groups now because I really want to give people a chance to chat with one another. We've got some questions there. What kind of events happen near you? What do you do already, or what could you do in the future to be present in those places? Those are some questions you might want to use to jump into conversation. I also don't mind if your conversations go off in different directions, but you've got 15 minutes. Okay, welcome back, folks. Welcome back to the main room. It'd be great to hear from you all. I'm just going to change my view to gallery view so I can see all your lovely faces. It'd be great to hear some feedback from you in terms of what did you talk about, but were there any resources or ideas or practical stuff that you found really helpful that was shared in the breakout groups, particularly resources and ideas and suggestions would be great to hear. Would anyone like to share? Michelle?
Just at the end there, we had Bridget Down in our group, and that was fantastic because I was talking about agricultural show. There's one up here that I'd like to have a prayer. I was thinking of a prayer space or a chill out space, but Bridget said a really good idea at the end, to make it as accessible as possible. In other words, don't expect people to again cross over your threshold to come into your space to pray. For example, coming into a tent, which is just as inaccessible as asking them to come into church, which they don't, but to have prayer activities outside. So for example, a prayer tree outside. And it's also got me thinking about outdoor prayer and maybe planting some prayer activities around the site of the show, even in stealthy places where awesome. People can just stumble upon them somehow as well.
Oh, I love that. Stealth prayer. Guerrilla prayer. That's great. Thank you, Michelle. Anyone else like to share something about what you talked about in your groups? Bridget?
It wasn't anything we discussed in the group, but to go on that, and this can be used at any festival. Where is the greatest need at a festival? It's the toilets. So, you know, think about the backs of toilet doors and, you know, what can you be putting into the toilet areas that can get people thinking? So actually at festivals, you know, you can go along that really jovial theme, and at shows, toilets are rank. So what can you be doing in those areas?
Any other particularly practical ideas or suggestions that came out of your breakout groups?
Angela mentioned something good about goodie bags, like gift bags.
Yes, and this isn't so much a festival. This is just something that came out of lockdown when we couldn't engage with sort of our children's groups in church. We started in the Christmas of 2020 by putting a few goodie bags with sort of colouring and stuff in. But it's kind of grown, and now, I mean, most recently at Easter and Christmas, I think we did 90 goodie bags, and it's just builds up, you know, talking to families as they come past, and you get to sort of see people on repeated occasions, and they recognize you from the last time, and I mean, at one point people were asking us how were things with the church because of the pandemic, you know, when are you reopening? You know, as a community, some of them were concerned about us as the church, but equally they thought it was lovely what we were doing for the community.
That's great, Angela, thank you. Anyone else like to share anything you talked about in your groups? Pete and Bridget, I wonder if you've got any practical advice. Oh, sorry, I've not been looking at the chat, just looking at it now. Oh, puppets, lots of puppets happening in the chat. And yes, again, Michelle, providing nice, clean baby change or breastfeeding area. Again, it's about what's the need, isn't it? What's the need of the people? And I think that's another reason why research is really important. So we don't assume other people's needs, you know, that we are amongst people, we are one of the punters at an event, we listen, we watch out. What do we need when we're there? You know, it's not about us, and them, it's about us being part of a community and recognizing our own needs as much as everyone else's. Yeah, Bridget and Pete, I wonder if you've got any kind of practical ideas or resources or activities that you found, you know, trying to get kind of into the nitty-gritty. What is it actually that you did in the tent or in the places? What ideas really worked? It'd be good to hear some of that stuff.
The times that it was the most successful would be when we followed a really strong theme in the tent and really jazzed it up. So maybe on creation or love, some of these heftier themes, and then that sparked imagination. If you look like you're having a good time, other people will want to be part of what you're doing, and want to become and see what this is all about. And I think you need to be genuine, really genuine. So somebody talked about goodie bags just a minute ago. Just make sure that if you want to be a church that is promoting something of creation and being an eco church, then watch what you're putting in your goodie bags. Is like my big pet hate with these things. Just be aware that people really do look in, you know, this is their moment to really see the church alive. So what is that message you want to be giving out?
Thank you, Bridget. Yeah, an important reminder that we need to pay attention to detail, you know, if this is us being the church. Yeah, thank you. And Pete, what about you? Any kind of, what activities work the best, or, you know, ideas that work the best?
I think there's a number of things. I think making sure you've got prayer support on it is key. This time around, we've got a whole church actually praying for us. We've got a small chapel that doesn't really engage with this, but they're incredibly prayerful. So I went out to see them, spoke to them and said, look, would you be willing to meet on a daily basis for half an hour or so, whether over Zoom or in person, and just pray for us at the festival? And we've got that in place now. Each year we've had something like that in place, but this is possibly the most formal we've gone with that. I think the other really key thing is training, in that you want to make sure that your volunteers understand the ethos of what you're trying to do. If you've got people whose idea of evangelism is based on what they've seen of street evangelists, you don't necessarily want to get them into the sanctuary at Glastonbury. Not unless you've explained to them exactly what you're doing and they're on board with it. So training, I think, is very key on that, so that you make sure you get that sort of open, hospitable, non-invasive sort of approach. And it's one of those things where you're there to serve, but with a view to hopefully God will give you an opportunity to go beyond that. Quite often I've found with the chapels I work with, they view service as evangelism. Service is mission, and there's a confusion there. It's like toddler groups are service unless you're willing to take it that step further as you develop relationships with the parents and carers that come to it. So we have toddler groups where we've built the relationships with the carers and parents, and they will come to us now and they'll go, I'm having a really hard time at the moment. I'd be really grateful if you pray for me. They don't necessarily believe that prayer will do anything, but they're open to the possibility. So it's building those relationships. And as far as Elemental goes, it's basically built on 5 C's: coffee, cake, conversation, comfort, and crafts. You're looking to find ways to build openings for conversation. They don't have to be about God. They can be, well, I have one lady who'd been a Methodist her entire life and was in her 70s, and she had an hour-long conversation with a guy about cider making. So conversations could be any kind, but that man came back time after time after time, and we've seen him the last 3 years. So it's that kind of thing, those openings, those spaces for conversation.
I love that, Pete. I always use the road to Emmaus as a biblical kind of understanding of the way that we can think about evangelism. You know, Jesus meets the disciples on the road to Emmaus. They're having a pretty tough time. He chats to them, then he's revealed to them, and they rush back to tell their friends about him. Now he says to them, what is it that you're talking about as you're on the road together? And I love the idea that if they'd said to him, oh, actually, you know, we're talking about cider making, Jesus might have had a 2-hour chat with them on the road to Emmaus about cider making, rather than about the scriptures and about himself and about the resurrection. And I love that understanding of evangelism, that we meet people where they are, and we journey with them in however long we've got with them. And maybe we'll get an opportunity to talk about our faith, but maybe we'll just chat about cider making, and that's okay. I love that. There's a resource that I just want to flag with everybody that is just been launched this week, so it's very exciting. I'm putting the link in the chat now. It's basically a summary, an introductory guide to the things we're talking about this evening. And I do need to thank Pete and Bridget for their help with this resource. It was a kind of a joint effort between us three, and we think it covers some of the basics of the things that we're talking about this evening. Now, I also want to flag that at the end of that resource, it says that there's a bigger, more substantial resource available, and that's a resource that Pete has written all about the Elemental Tent. So if you've got a local music festival and you're thinking the Elemental Tent or some version of it sounds like something that would work for us, if you're thinking coffee, cake, conversation, comfort and crafts it's stuff we can get on board with, then we can share the more significant resource with you, the longer resource with you. And Pete's also written lots of training materials in that. So if you've got a group of people that you're wanting to train up to take to a festival or an event, there's lots of training materials that Pete's written as part of that. So if there's anyone interested in receiving that longer set of resources, then all you need to do is email me, and my email address is on the shorter resource. So please do take a look at the resource, the link in the chat. You'll see when you follow the link, there's a big button in the middle that says Your Guide to Mission at Festivals and Events. And if you click on that, you'll get to the resource. Now, I wonder, in the last 15 minutes, we've got some time for questions. We've also got time, if we've missed anything, to talk about the ideas or practical stuff or resources that we found useful. First of all, are there any questions? And then I will ask if we think we've missed anything. If you've got any questions, do pop them in the chat and we'll respond to them. Bridget, Jill and Pete, I'm going to bring you back onto the screen. And it'd be great to hear from any of you if you think there's anything we've missed or anything else you'd like to add. I can't find Pete. Where are you, Pete? There you are. Sorry.
I was hiding.
You were hiding. So, yes, is there anything else you three would like to add to the conversation?
I think I'd just like to add that you need to always, your teams need to be always aware that they are, as I've said before, the face of the church. And at times of real need, people will reach out to the church. And in both the agricultural shows and in the sanctuary, I've found people entering our spaces or engaging in conversation as we've stood out handing water to people and asking for prayer. And I think it's the element of it that actually sometimes we don't think about, because actually we don't really realize that we will actually get to that point in conversation with people, but people will do it. And I've seen it and I've experienced it, and it always catches you, and you're like, oh my gosh, either that moment that you say to them, they've just told you something horrific or significant in their lives, that moment that you're prompted to say, is it okay if I pray about this? Or people will directly ask you to pray for it. And I think that's something that's really important to flag and to be aware of. Yeah.
Thank you, Bridget. That's great. Yeah, a reminder to pay attention to those little nudges and to see them. Yeah, thank you. Jill.
In the experience that I've had with this kind of stuff, it's really interesting that what Bridget's just said ties in really closely with the idea of having diverse teams as well. Because it's absolutely fascinated me how some people will go for somebody in a collar and want to talk to the person in the collar, and other people will just avoid the person with the collar like a plague and want to talk to somebody who definitely hasn't got a collar. So I think there's something about knowing who we are, being aware of the other people in our team, and just being prepared to sort of stand back when we can see somebody's particularly wanting to talk to one person. And I just think that makes sense, doesn't it? Because we're all so different, that the more diverse your team is, the more likely you are to, men, gender issue, gender spread, all those kinds of things, really. So it's interesting. Yeah. But being ready to pray, I agree. I think I was so shocked when I first started doing this kind of stuff at how many times people specifically said, can you pray? Yeah,
definitely. It is, people are so much more open than we give them credit for, and so much looking for that more than we realise. Pete, any final words of wisdom from you?
I think you're right, Holly. I think the thing is that although people have drifted away from the church, they still have a spiritual side to them. Most of them, they're still looking for something. I mean, I stood outside our tent with a lady who defined herself as a Wiccan, and we stood there chatting, and she went, I've never felt more comfortable in a tent at this place. And I said, well, that's because we both know there's more to life than just you live, you die, you worm food. And I said, the only difference is obviously we're right and you're wrong. And then she hit me with the crutches she was using at the time. But we've seen her every year. And I think the one thing I would say to anybody contemplating anything like this is look at your volunteers and look at their gifts. If they've got a gift that they're really good at making tea, make use of that and make them feel appreciated for it, because the tea makers are probably the most underappreciated in a lot of ways, particularly at things like this. If you've got people whose gift is creativity, get them on craft, get them talking to people about craft. Just use people in the area where they are best.
Thank you.
That would be the big thing I would say for this.
Yeah, and that helps with the joyfulness thing as well, doesn't it? If we're doing stuff we love and enjoy, then we'll feel joyful and look joyful. And Pete, I mean, I would not say to many people that they could get away with saying the phrase, you're wrong and I'm right. I would never recommend that in evangelism, but because you have the gift of cheek and charm, you get away with it.
But it's also about the relationship. We'd spoken probably a good 24 times over 2 days, over 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I knew where we were with that. Jill, you keep putting your hand up.
I wanted to just ask you two a question actually, which was about, if I say uniform, I don't mean uniform exactly, but I'm just really interested because when I did street pastors regularly, I was really surprised by how many times people thought they'd met me before. And actually they hadn't met me before, but they'd met the team before. And so I don't imagine that, I imagine that it's not that appropriate to wear a uniform in lots of settings, but I just wondered, those of you that keep going back to the same place and are trying to build up relationship and people are coming expecting to find you there, how do you build up continuity? Is it always the same people, or is there anything recognizable about who you are? Or
what we try to do in the elemental tent is get people to commit to being there on more than one day if possible. We look at breaking it down into, because it runs 11 to 11, we don't expect anybody apart from me to be there all day. So we break it down into 3-hour shifts. But what we ask is if people feel able, they come for more than one shift. So they might come the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or they might just do 2 days, whatever works for them. But it means that when people come and have a conversation, they'll come back in and they'll go, oh, I'm looking for the woman I was talking to earlier. She looked like blah, blah, blah. And we'll go, oh yeah, she's back tomorrow at 2 o'clock. So you can, if you want to have a chat with her particularly. So we build it up like that. But what we've done is insist that people come comfortable. So that they look like punters, essentially. They don't stand out. And then when someone sits down with them, conversation feels a bit more comfortable, I think.
Bridget.
Bridget's going to go in the other direction.
Yeah, so when we've done various things with the sanctuary tent, it's generally been a fancy dress kind of theme, and people know that, you know, we are who we are. And also we used to have to wear high vis. Actually at the county shows as well, we have to wear high vis. So often there's that kind of official nature as well to our dress. Also at the county shows, if you've got a children's area, it's really important to have your children's helpers in something really recognizable, like a hoodie or a polo shirt that's of a bright color, so parents know that, you know, if you're suddenly colouring in with their toddler, then that's okay. And actually that's been really important and noted as really a really good thing to have done. So yeah, where I do agree with Peter about actually, you know, you do want to be part of the vibe that's going on. Actually being recognizable is really important too. So I think it's about context, and it's about where you are in that situation.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely would agree that sometimes having something that helps you to stand out, like a street pastor uniform when you're in the middle of a town centre on a Saturday night, or something bright, often helps people to engage with you and sometimes reduces the barriers that people feel. So yeah, thank you for that question, Jill. We're gonna
sorry, can I just add one last thing? I don't
one
know,
very quick thing, Pete.
Okay, safeguarding is incredibly important.
Yes, that's a very important quick thing.
Do not miss that out.
Yeah.
We had one episode where a girl got very upset because she couldn't find her mum, and 2 of our people took her off for a walk around the site at 7 o'clock at night to look for her mother.
Yeah, so
it did not go well for them. Safeguarding is incredibly important. Make sure people understand that. Things
like safeguarding, risk assessing and training your team, obviously all really important. Thank you for mentioning that, Pete. Yeah, good to be aware of. And things like, also just to say, mental health first aid. It's, you know, usually good if you've got somebody on your team that's mentally health first aid trained, because if people are coming to you with difficult conversations, it can be really important to have somebody there with some expertise in that area. We're going to finish the evening now, and we're going to finish with some closing prayer that Pete has used in the elemental tent from some that he's just obviously going to find. Pete, I'll just hand over to you to close us in closing prayer, if that's okay.
Oh, right. Because of the setting we're in, we've always finished by using the Northumbria community's evening prayer to finish our day. It's rather long, so I'm going to go for a very shortened version of it. And this is part of the evening prayer. So, my soul waits for the Lord, more than those who watch for the morning, more than those who watch for the morning. Out of the depths I have cried to you, O Lord, hear my voice. With my whole heart I want to praise you, O Lord, hear my voice. If you, Lord, should mark iniquities, who could stand? Who could stand? I will wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and in his word do I hope. Lord, you have always given bread for the coming day, and though I am poor, today I believe. Lord, you've always given strength for the coming day, and though I am weak, today I believe. Lord, you've always given peace for the coming day, and though of anxious heart, today I believe. Lord, you've kept me safe from trials, and now, tried as I am, today I believe. Lord, you have always marked the road for the coming day, and though it may be hidden, today I believe. Lord, you have always lightened this darkness of mine, and though the night is here, today I believe. Lord, you have always spoken when time was right, and though you be silent now, today I believe. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pete. Thank you everyone so much for coming. I believe most of our email addresses are in the chat, so do feel free, please, to contact us if you have any further questions or conversations you'd like to have. And yeah, have a lovely rest of your evening. Bye everyone.